Today, I am going to be showing you guys my brand new Rec and Pro-Am center build in NBA 2K23. Now, this build is a stat stuffer in the Rec because you can pull up numbers like this right here. 22 rebounds, 22 points, 8 assists, 7 for 11 from 3 in a win with straight randoms. This build is absolutely insane in Rec, and it can dominate in Pro-Am too. You guys will see those highlights as well, but let me not hold you guys for much longer. Let me show you guys how to make this build. Let's go. Hold on, before we get started really quickly, if you want access to the best available jump shot information, I highly recommend that you go pick up a premium subscription at NBA2KLabs.com using code Joey to get 20% off at checkout. All right, so when it comes to making this build, you're going to be making it at the center position. Everything else on this screen, you can customize however you want. I like using right-handed shooters though, so my handedness is right. So now when it comes to the body settings, we're going to be going with the height of 7'2", 230 pounds with a 7'11" wingspan and a defined body shape. Now, let me clarify something very quickly. This build I am going to be using for Pro-Am, so it's built in a very specific way tailored to our team. But don't think that you have to click off of this video because I'm going to be showing another version at the end of this video, which is a little bit more meta and ready to use with any team that you go up against. But both versions of this build are going to be fantastic, but we made some minor tweaks to make this build perfect for our Pro-Am team. So now when it comes to the finishing, you're going to get an 80 driving dunk, which is going to get you quick drops off one, as well as straight arm tomahawk dunk packages. And then we're also going to get an 80 standing dunk, which is going to get you the basic big man contact dunk packages on this build. Now, you're probably wondering one thing: why do we not have the close shot upgraded at all? Understand that the way that we're running this build on offense, I'm going to be a cutter when it comes to finishing at the rim. I'm not going to be doing PNR on this build. So usually when I'm going to be finishing at the rim, it's going to be a wide open take right by the basket because I'm usually going to be cutting on a smaller defender like a guard that's trying to defend a person in the corner. So now when it comes to showing the highlights on this build, we're going to be showing it in two game modes, which is going to be Rec and Pro-Am, which is where I highly recommend that you use this type of build. It's not going to be that great for Park because it is 7-2. It will be too slow, but I highly recommend this build again in Rec and Pro-Am. And as you see, we're running with long rated, which is Laker fans team. And like I mentioned earlier on in this finishing section, we're going to be doing a lot of cuts on this build over smaller defenders, which is why we have the high dunk and we have the high standing dunk, so we can finish on top of those smaller guards. And we don't need a super high close shot to do that because again, it's going to be a lot of wide open attempts at the basket. So overall, I would say the finishing is definitely the weakest part of this build, but when it comes to everything else on this build, the shooting, the playmaking, and the defense, it's all going to be fantastic, and you're not going to want to miss any of it because as you can see right here, this build actually does get playmaking takeover, and we'll explain why and how we use that takeover on this build to help our team win more games. But now let's move on to the shooting category. Let's go. So now when it comes to the shooting, we're going to get an 80 mid-range and a 79 3-point rating, and you see the free throw is really high. I'll explain that in a minute, but let's just focus on the mid-range and the 3-point shot. So we actually ended up going with a 7'11" wingspan instead of the complete max at an 8-foot wingspan because we wanted to get Hall of Fame space creator on this build. This fits my play style. I do a lot of post hop shots as well as hop jumpers, so I wanted to make sure I got that massive boost from having Hall of Fame space creator on this build so I could take my step back middies, my step back threes, and my post hop shots, as you'll see later on in this video and throughout all of the future Pro-Am and Rec gameplays you're going to see on this build. 79 3-pointer is also going to be very serviceable. I'm going to be a corner spot up, so I'm going to have silver catch and shoot, gold corner specialist, gold claymore, which are all going to be fantastic badges, which will make me a knockdown shooter. Another important thing, especially with how crazy rotations can be in Pro-Am, I'm also going to be using blinders as well as green machine to help keep me hot once I start making some shots. So then lastly, let's quickly talk about the free throw rating. It's an 87. It's very high. There's a very specific reason for that, and it has to do with our takeover. I'm going to go over this a little bit more in detail towards the end of the video, so make sure you stick around so you can understand why that free throw is so high. I know it's kind of weird, but trust me, there's a reason for it. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this build is going to be a knockdown shooter, whether using it in the Rec or whether you're using it in Pro-Am. And I just want to point out very quickly as a disclaimer, I actually have been having trouble shooting in Pro-Am, but it has nothing to do with the build. A lot of 7-2 poppers pretty much use a very similar thing to this. Usually they just end up maxing up the wingspan. So in all likelihood, the shooting issues that I've been having so far on this build are really just due to the fact that I'm just not used to Pro-Am yet, because again, this is my first time ever doing Pro-Am, and we're doing Hall of Fame League matchups, which is kind of crazy as my first taste of Pro-Am, just going straight into it. But again, the build is fantastic. I'll get through my issues, but I'm also really excited to take advantage of the shot creating abilities that this build has, even though it is at the height of 7'2". Having that 80 mid-range allows me to shoot a lot of dribble pull-ups over people's faces, as you see right here. Not only that, but it allows me to get a little bit into a post game, especially when it comes to like being in a mid to high post where I can hit my post fades, post hop shots. Again, those aren't really moves that you need post control for. So me and Tonic, actually, he does this as well, where a lot of our scoring comes from the mid to high post to where we don't need post control. We don't really do post spins. We don't really back down. We don't really drop step. We just get in the post, take advantage of that positioning, take advantage of that leverage and height advantage that we have in those situations and just shoot over people. But I think now at this point, I think you understand everything that comes with the shooting on this build. So now let's move on to the playmaking. So now moving on to the playmaking, we're going to get that 86 pass accuracy, which is going to get us break starter on Hall of Fame, as well as gold needle threader Hall of Fame, dimer Hall of Fame, floor general, pretty much a lot of playmaking badges on Hall of Fame. That's going to turn this big man into a crazy passing big. And it was super important to get this high pass accuracy because we're going to be running a 5-out offense. So I have to be able to make dots across the court from one spot to the other very quickly, get them in between defenders, and once we're getting boards, try and get as many points as possible in transition offense. So we had to go with that 86 pass accuracy. You're also going to see the ball handle and the speed with ball are upgraded a little bit. That's going to help us get playmaking takeover, and I'll explain which playmaking takeover we're using towards the end of this video because it is a big one to help us win more games in Pro-Am, and it'll help you win more games in Rec as well, so stick around for that. So now you're going to see that the super high pass accuracy is going to help us in two situations. One, when we're in transition offense and we want to try and advance the ball up the court very quickly to open shooters, to open cutters, to get us easy buckets, because in Pro-Am, you want to try and get easy buckets whenever you can. And when I'm using this build, my goal when I'm playing in Pro-Am, especially now since the build is pretty much maxed out for me, is to try and get a double-double. Want to get at least 10 rebounds, want to get at least 10 assists. That's my goal. Scoring-wise, I'm not that big. If I end up getting a triple-double, hey, that's cool. But really, the big thing for me is securing boards, getting assists, and making sure we win. But I think you've seen the playmaking highlights enough, so now let's move on to the big thing, the defense. So now when it comes to the defense, we're going to get a 75 interior, 64 perimeter, 63 steal, a 93 block, which is going to get us gold anchor, an 83 offensive rebound, and a 99 defensive rebound, which is going to get us Hall of Fame rebound chaser. Now, when it comes to Pro-Am, upgrading interior defense to like an 80 or higher is not that big of a deal because realistically, I'm going to be rotating, trying to get blocks, trying to get in front of defenders. And not only that, but for the most part, when you're in Pro-Am, there's not really any post scores. It's going to be a lot of inside bigs that are just trying to pump fake in the paint, which as long as you play hands up defense, have a high block rating, have decent anchor rating, you're not going to need super high interior defense. So we ended up going with the 75 here. We ended up getting plenty of stops on this build, and especially now after patch, I'm also getting plenty of stops in the Rec as well. Can almost get 3 to 5 blocks a game on this build, but enough talking. Let's go actually see it happen. Now, when me and Laker Fan were making this build, we talked a lot about what was the more important thing between rebounding and blocking, and we pretty much just agreed on the philosophy that it's more important to have Hall of Fame rebound chaser than Hall of Fame anchor, especially considering I'm pretty much going for rebounds every single possession, but I'm not going for blocks every single possession. So we made sure it was most important to get that Hall of Fame rebound chaser, especially considering we're running a pretty small lineup where our next best rebounder is a 6'11" with silver rebound chaser. So right here, we run a little bit of a triangle rotation, getting down low with the big. He's coming back up to try and run a little bit of PNR. Immediately just hits the quick slip, and he's trying to go up with the front clutch, and we immediately get the stop. I've never seen a stop on a front clutch before until then. Right there, we're getting the block as well. Again, this build has its role on the defense. My job is to swing down and get blocks on this build, which is why we have that gold anchor. And then secondly, it's also very important for me to make sure I'm crashing down every single possession to make sure we can get more boards, because more boards is going to lead to more possessions for us, and more possessions for us can lead to more buckets, which leads to more wins. And yeah, I don't have to explain this much more. Let's just take a look at the build in its entirety. So now here is the build fully maxed out. You can see the physicals as well. Now I'll explain a couple things. Obviously, you guys are probably seeing that 50 strength and you're very concerned. So first thing first, I'll show you another version of this build that does have higher strength. And secondly, we don't go with super high strength on this build because I'm most likely not going to be trying to box out the big. I am just crashing out of the corner to try and get the board. So boxing out a defender is really not my job. So having that strength to box out people is not that big. And secondly, I'm not going going to be setting screens on this build. We're running 5 out, so I didn't really need that high of a brick wall rating. So now let's talk about takeovers. The primary takeover that we are going to be using is Team Takeover Boost. Now, if you have never used this takeover before, understand that this is going to allow your teammates to get their takeovers faster when they score off of your assists when you are in takeover. So in order to benefit the rest of the team, it's actually very important to get me takeover as quick as possible, which is also why we upgraded the free throw super high, so that when our team receives team fouls, I'm the one shooting the free throws, so I can increase my takeover meter as fast as possible. So now this build is complete, and when you come out of the My Player Builder, you're going to get the player comparisons of Arvydas Sabonis, Joel Embiid, and Domantas Sabonis. Crazy father-son duo right there. And you're going to get the build name Diming Mid-Range Score on this build. Now, let's take a look at the second version of this build that I recommend that you guys make if you're really only going to be using this build in the rec center. And boom, here is this build right now. It's just got a little bit more strength, a little bit less offensive rebound, and a little bit more close shots. So you can hit those close shots. You'll have more strength if you go up against post scorers, and just at the sacrifice of a little bit less rebounding. But that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you made it all the way to the end of the video, comment long awaited down below. That's the name of the Pro-Am team. Really excited. Going to be getting you guys Pro-Am gameplay as soon as possible. It's going to be long. It's going to be a mix between live com and post commentary, and it's going to be my own style that I really want to try and implement. But that's it for now. I'm out. Peace.